Well, good afternoon. As everybody here knows, all eyes of the world have been on Glasgow with its 400 private jets, the elites of the world converging on this European city, a lot of the Biden cabinet there. For 10 months, the Biden administration has been laying out key elements of its climate plan that it was celebrating in Glasgow. Here's what it is. We've seen it. These are the facts. Restricting American energy production, purposely curtailing the building of American energy infrastructure like pipelines, laying off thousands of hardworking Americans in these sectors, and pressuring American financial institutions not to invest in American energy, especially in places like the great state of Alaska, while at the same time having the president and others beg OPEC adversaries like Russia and Iran to produce more energy. In a remarkably short period of time, this Biden Green New Deal plan has had dramatic negative consequences for working families, particularly in terms of energy prices at the pump, home heating fuel, natural gas, all of which are spiking as a direct result of these policies, just as winter is coming. There is a strong indication, particularly from statements by climate czar Gina McCarthy, that high energy prices for Americans are actually part of their Green New Deal policies so that, as she said, quote, it can help accelerate the move to renewables around the world. Instead of Glasgow, those who care about energy, jobs, environment, climate issues would have been better to focus more on things going on back home, particularly Virginia and even New Jersey last night, where it has become abundantly clear that the Biden-Kerry Green New Deal policies embraced by the National Democratic Party have dramatically lost touch with common sense approaches to energy and jobs and working Americans and their families. What we want to do this afternoon is lay out a competing vision, the details of which you can find in this nice handy handout for all of you to take a look at. A number of us have been working on these issues for months. It is based on facts and data and, importantly, what is already working for our country, not some overnight dystopian reordering of our energy sector and our daily lives. So here are a few areas where our vision contrasts dramatically with the Biden-Kerry Green New Deal and where we think the vast majority of Americans, whether in Alaska or Texas or Virginia or New Jersey, support the work that we're working on right now. Our framework is based on American abundance and leveraging America's many unique strengths, especially our world-class natural resources, whose production has actually brought down emissions in the lowest carbon-intensive manufacturing in the world. While the Biden-Kerry vision is one of planned scarcity, where Americans have to suffer to bring down emissions through higher energy prices. Our vision emphasizes leadership in clean energy innovation and resources like natural gas to both expand the use at home and export abroad as a central way to lower global emissions. The Biden-Kerry Green New Deal vision involves telling our allies, believe it or not to buy American natural gas, and instead relies on Russia and OPEC and empty promises from authoritarian regimes about their greenhouse gas reductions. Our vision recognizes that American natural resources can be leveraged to produce millions of jobs in related U.S. manufacturing sectors, including clean technology. The Biden-Kerry Green New Deal will import more technology from China and relies on critical minerals from that country as well. And finally, and importantly, our vision is focused squarely on the American worker who has built this country and yet is now denigrated by the far left because these Americans continue to produce and mine things like oil and gas, natural gas, and critical minerals, all of which we need and will continue to need for decades. We don't need multi-billion-dollar government slush funds called the Civilian Climate Corps, like the Green New Deal proposes, because America already has hundreds of thousands of heroic workers, like those in the building trades who work hard to produce energy, lower emissions, and enhance our national security. If you look at the handout we've given you on those who are enthusiastic about the plan and the framework that we put forward, we are particularly proud of some of the comments from some of the top building trade officials in the country. And this brings me to my final point. We believe our vision and framework is mainstream, it's common sense, and has the potential to be bipartisan. As I mentioned, just look at the handout of the different groups and elected officials who have previously and presently emphasized support of many of these all-of-the-above energy policy ideas in our framework. And the reason is clear. It is based on what's already working. Since 2005, the United States has reduced greenhouse gas emissions by almost 15%, more than any other major economy in the world. Our plan is based on abundance, not scarcity, prosperity, not gas lines and empty shelves, and importantly, we believe it is unifying. Unlike the Biden Green New Deal, Kerry Green New Deal plan, it does not pit one group of Americans against another, one region of the country, blue states versus red energy-producing states against each other. We believe it's the start of an effective, holistic plan that will help move the country forward, and it is needed now more than ever. So I'm very pleased to be joined by so many of my colleagues. Senator Cruz has another appointment, so I want him to be able to say a few words, and then we'll go in order. Thank you again for all my colleagues for being here.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. Thank you to each of the senators who are gathered here and your leadership fighting for energy to be widely available and affordable. The Green New Deal is a disaster. It's a disaster for American families. It's a disaster for jobs. It is a disaster for our national security. It's a disaster, ironically, for the environment. And it's a disaster politically, as elections like Virginia and New Jersey last night demonstrate. If you want abundant jobs, you want low-cost, abundant energy. If you want families to be able to make their budgets fit their needs, you want abundant, low-cost energy. If you want high-paying union jobs, you want abundant, low-cost energy. If you want to protect the national security of the United States and not send billions to nations who hate us and want to kill us, you want abundant, low-cost energy. And if you want to protect the environment, you want abundant, low-cost energy. One of the most revealing aspects of this debate is the radical left's Green New Deal is not about the environment, because under their stated objectives, their policies fail. If you judge the policies of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and John Kerry solely on the criterion, do they reduce pollution? Do they reduce greenhouse gases? The Biden-Harris-Kerry policies fail badly. First day in office, Joe Biden, with a stroke of a pen, shut down the Keystone Pipeline. Destroyed 11,000 jobs, destroyed 8,000 high-paying union jobs. But the results of that, it's not that the Canadians are letting the oil remain in the tar sands. No, instead, they're continuing to develop that oil. But now that oil, one of two things is happening to it. Either it is being put on trucks or trains going south to the United States, or it's being put on ships going west to China. In both instances, it pollutes more, it emits more greenhouse gases, and there's a greater risk of spills. The safest way to transport that oil with the lowest emissions is a pipeline. And yet, Biden-Harris and Kerry do not care. Likewise, on day one, Joe Biden shut down all new federal leases on federal lands for oil and gas production. U.S. production is going down as a result. Prices are going up. Heating oil, when your heating oil prices go up this winter, you can thank Joe Biden and John Kerry and Kamala Harris for that. When you pay more at the pump for a gallon of gas, California just a couple of weeks ago was selling gas for $7.49 a gallon. When you fill your tank and spend $100 to fill your tank, you can thank Joe Biden or John Kerry or Kamala Harris. But the result of that, suddenly, the White House realized that sky-high gas prices hurts working men and women, and it's bad politically, as last night demonstrates. And so now they are absurdly urging OPEC to produce more. Joe Biden is begging Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, produce more oil. The oil and gas they produce is dirtier. It pollutes more. If the only test is, are we helping the environment, the Biden-Kerry-Harris plan pollutes more and emits more greenhouse gases. What nation had the single greatest reduction in CO2 emission last year? The answer, and it's not even close, is the United States of America. We led the world. What nation is the world's greatest polluter? China. China was nowhere to be found at this conference in Scotland. China's producing new coal plants. Why is America leading the world in reducing pollution and carbon dioxide emission? Because on a widespread scale, we're substituting natural gas for coal in electricity production. If the only thing you care about is reducing pollution and greenhouse gases, then you should embrace natural gas in particular, because it is reducing pollution and greenhouse gases more than anything else on earth. And yet Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and John Kerry are trying to kill it. One final point. Not only do they not believe what they're saying, but their hypocrisy is rampant. Headed to this climate conference, these officials flew in giant jets. John Kerry has a private jet that has flown dozens of times this past year all around the country. I don't know about you, but I don't have a private jet. I don't believe any of the people on this stage have their own private jet.
Portland does.
John Kerry, when asked about his private jet, said, really, for someone like me, it's the only way that makes sense to travel. What dripping, condescending arrogance. You know, when we travel, I'm in the exit row on Southwest Airlines.
Let's land this jet, Ted.
That hypocrisy demonstrates they don't mean what they're saying. You want jobs, you want to protect the environment, you want abundant, low-cost energy.
Thank you, Ted. Thanks, Ted. Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Dan, for your leadership and friendship and all of my colleagues. You know, I want to hone in a little bit on the environmental and climate advantages of American-made energy. It's been alluded to, but you might notice in our materials we've set some goals. These are aspirational in some respects, but very pragmatic in other respects. We invite others to bring their ideas of how to enhance energy development in the United States in a way that also reduces greenhouse gas emissions and participates in the reduction of global emissions. But what happened in Glasgow that was probably the most disturbing to me was that we have a president who went there and apologized for America's excellence and then provided cover for the biggest polluters in the world. We have an opportunity with our allies and with our technologies, I think, to set a different goal than simply let's get America to zero. Let's unilaterally disarm the American economy by just getting to zero and then let China do what they do. And you realize in recent years, for every ton of reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that the United States has reached, China has added 4. We reduce 1, they add 4. That's not much of a global strategy. So I'd rather have us set, for example, a goal, rather than U.S. being 0 by 2050, let's set a goal for the planet to reduce emissions by 40% by 2050. If the planet reduces, its GHGs by 40% by 2050, we will have done 3.5 times more good than if the United States simply unilaterally disarms our economy. And that doesn't even consider the synergies of American technology. American technology. We are doing things around this country. I mean, look back to Dan's point about the reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, but over the decades, we've reduced SOx, NOx, mercury, particulate matter in several of our plants. We've acquiesced much of our leadership in nuclear to our adversaries while we invented it. I think we ought to restore nuclear energy as a high priority, especially with the newer technologies that provide more efficient, smaller plants. And then that technology itself becomes an innovation for sale. But we have to hold our allies and adversaries to a higher standard, not just unilaterally disarm in the United States. So a whole bunch of things. Hydrogen, great opportunity in this country, both green and blue hydrogen. Dan's already talked about natural gas. You realize that according to the Department of Energy's analysis, natural gas produced in the United States of America, liquefied and shipped to Europe, has 41% lower greenhouse gas emissions than Vladimir Putin's natural gas produced in Russia and put through a pipeline when you consider the life cycle of that natural gas. So natural gas is still a big part of it. It's going to be a big part of it going forward. But so are other technologies. I'll just end it at that and then look forward to some questions. And more importantly, really looking forward to the future when our colleagues bring even more better, greater ideas.
Well, I want to join my colleagues in thanking our leaders, Dan Sullivan and Kevin Kramer, for putting together this framework that is not only responsive to the Green New Deal, but is better than the Green New Deal for the environment. As has been said earlier, if we were to spend the amount of money that the Green New Deal contemplates spending on its agenda and give that money to India to clean up its environment, we would be doing so much more for the world than we can do by spending it here in the United States. Why? Because the private sector in the United States, employing American people, using our ingenuity, is producing more energy and less carbon in the air every year. We consume more energy every year because of our increased demands on computer power, and we do it with lower emissions. Think if we expanded that to India. China is by far the biggest polluter in the world, by far. India is right behind them, and India is going to be the largest population on the globe. If we would export our technology, our liquid natural gas, and help them as the largest democratic republic on earth, we are the oldest, they're the largest, we would do more for global climate change than we can do by spending the amount of money that the Biden administration wants to throw at the word climate change without solving the problems. So what I'm so proud of is the focus that Senator Sullivan, Senator Kramer, and others involved have taken to making sure that we move the needle on climate, not move the needle on the rhetoric of climate. That's what the other side's doing. We want to move the needle on the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Now, I'm one of those people who believes that mankind is a small contributor to climate change, that most of climate change is beyond the control of mankind. But certainly a small amount of climate change is caused by mankind. And no nation on earth is better equipped, better prepared and has a better track record at producing it than the United States of America. So why would we shoot ourselves in the foot and give a leg up to countries like Russia and China who do not have the best interest of the climate in their agenda? Thank you so much. I applaud you both.
Very well done.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm pretty much an all of the above energy type guy. I support wind. I support solar. I support thermal. I support hydrogen. Unlike many of my Democratic colleagues, I support nuclear, particularly the new small modular reactors. But I also support oil and gas, and that's why I'm supporting this bill. It's a rational, reasoned plan. It's an energy policy that looks like somebody designed the damn thing on purpose. Because that's not what we have right now. President Biden has talked a lot about his plan. I don't completely understand it. As best I can tell, he wants us at some undetermined time in the future to be able to produce our energy without nuclear, without oil, and without natural gas, and certainly without coal. He doesn't really explain how we're going to get from where we are today to that future that he envisions, which is why you're seeing the disruptions in the energy supply throughout the world. Short term, as best I can tell, President Biden and Secretary Kerry's plan is let's don't produce our own fossil fuels. Even though the American economy, the greatest economy in all of human history, gets 80% of its energy from fossil fuels. He wants to end that abruptly. He doesn't want us to produce our own fossil fuels. He wants us to buy natural gas and oil from other countries and basically give countries that hate us more money so they'll have weapons. They can buy weapons to try to kill us. And that didn't make any sense to me. And it doesn't make any sense to the American people. Final point, you can't talk about energy without talking about climate change. The climate is changing. It's changing in my state. Our sea levels are going up about a foot a century. There are a multitude of reasons for it. We need to address it. But I see, and I think these colleagues of mine see, the changes in our climate as a discrete scientific problem. Unlike President Biden and Secretary Kerry and the other Trotsky-like wokers, they see climate change as a religion. And you can't talk about it unless you follow their dogma. It's much like their new critical race theory. And it's not popular with the American people, and it's not going to solve the problems that we face in terms of the changes that are taking place in our climate. This plan will.
I've got a speech in about 3 minutes, so I'm going to be brief, and probably all happy about that. I'm here to support these guys, and Senators Sullivan, Kramer, and Lummis in particular. for taking the time to put together a sensible, balanced plan with regard to energy, climate, and jobs. And that's really what it's about, American energy, jobs, and climate plan. And like many of the previous speakers, I believe in all the above. All the above in Ohio means everything. We've got natural gas, we've got coal, we've got oil, we have wind, we have solar, and we have nuclear. We have 2 nuclear plants. And the future, to me, is about American innovation. That's one thing I like about this proposal, because it talks about the need for us to continue to invest in innovative ways for us to use energy we have and come up with new ideas. Hydrogen is one that Senator Kramer mentioned as an example. I'm really excited about what can happen there, particularly hydrogen derived from natural gas, which we're doing in Ohio. I also think this plan is great because it talks about how to make our energy production across the board, including solar farms and wind farms and new natural gas facilities, much more efficient through permitting reform. And this is built into their plan. So instead of taking 10, 15 years to develop some of these projects, shortening the time frame, following all the environmental and other standards, but doing so in a more cost-effective way. Actually, it's easy to do because sometimes there are as many as 30 different federal permits that are required for an energy project. And it's usually done, one at a time, so it takes forever. By the time you're done with half of the permits, you've got to go back and get the new ones. You get the first ones again. It makes no sense. And also the lawsuits that come out of these projects create a lot more inefficiency. And that's in this plan as well, to say, let's streamline the process, make it work for American workers and for American businesses that are trying to develop innovative ways to deal with climate. Finally, I will say that the United States is making progress. I'm a big fan of carbon capture and sequestration as an example. We are very close, I think, to having a good breakthrough there. I'm very supportive of America continuing to lead the world in terms of providing some of these innovative ideas to the rest of the world, because as was made very clear here today, and it's absolutely true, if we don't do something about what's happening in the developing world, in other words, in China and India and Brazil and other countries, we can take our emissions down to zero, and unfortunately we'll still have roughly the same impact on climate. But if we make progress across the board and provide American innovation, American ideas, use our renewable energy, green energy expertise to help some of these other countries, we can overall make progress at a time when right now so many in the Biden administration are just looking to America to take those steps that are necessary, which would create fewer jobs and economic opportunity here in America, and not in the end have the effect that we all should want, which is to affect global climate change, because that's what it's about. So again, I want to thank my colleagues for coming up with a very sensible plan. I'm happy to be supportive of their efforts, but also just supportive of the process that they've taken, which is to look for input from everybody, try to come up with a plan that makes sense, and at the end of the day, create something that's good for energy, good for jobs, and good for climate.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, we'll take any questions, comments, suggestions. Yes.
Senator, do you think it's important to commit the nation to holding the rise in global warming to 1.5 degrees?
So our plan is not a top-down target. What we think we should do, we think that we can build on what's already working. And so we're not setting any targets like you just mentioned. What we're trying to do is say, look at where we're already having major impacts. Like I said, the United States is leading the world in terms of the reduction of global greenhouse gas emissions. But what we don't want to do, like the Green New Deal, is a top-down approach with regard to austerity. We think the better approach, and by the way, if you take a look at a number of the people who have been reviewing this plan and commenting on it, it's a broad cross-section, everybody from the U.S. Chamber to a lot of the unions. If we're building on what we're already doing, we think that has the potential to focus much more attention on the global goal. Let me give you one example. We have looked at, and we've had groups help us do studies on this, if you actually increase the exports of clean-burning American natural gas, something that John Kerry is reportedly going around the world saying to our allies, don't buy this, which is remarkable. If you increase this, the ability to actually bring down global emissions is enhanced. Why? India, China, by the way, who are all currently buying American natural gas. A lot of people don't know that. China is, India is, Japan, Korea, Taiwan. If we can increase those exports with our very clean burning gas to Europe as well. You heard the statistic that Senator Kramer mentioned about Russian gas through their pipelines being 40% more carbon intensive than American gas. That you can actually see some of the models that we've looked at up to a 9% decrease in global emissions. So we are not putting top-down targets. What we are saying is we are focused on what is working and what we've been able to do in our country, and to export not just the resources but the technology to help other countries and create more jobs here, which is why you've seen strong union support for what we're trying to do. We think that's the best approach.
Let me take a shot at the specific question about the degree, the temperature goal. It's okay to have an aspiration, I suppose, but we don't know what it will take to maintain that. I mean, it might do better than that. But what we can control, or at least aim at, are emission standards, right? Not whether it meets 1.5 degrees or less or more, I don't know, but we ought to do everything we can on the emission side, and that's more measurable. But I think you have to spread that out, and so you don't think it's just all about natural gas, and natural gas is certainly an important fuel, and we do produce it, and much cleaner than other parts of the world, and we ought to be selling it to the rest of the world. But in addition to that, let's talk about manufacturing for a little bit. We've lost a lot of manufacturing throughout the last few decades. They all said we could never get it back. Donald Trump brought a lot of it back. But if we brought back more of the supply chain, if you will, the manufacturing of things that we used to manufacture here into the United States, where we do have better standards, where we do have cleaner burning fuels, where we do it better, that's a significant impact. It's not just about the energy we produce, but it's the other things we produce as well. I might also just have, from a technological standpoint, I talked a little bit about nuclear, and I think John Kennedy probably touched on that pretty well. But nuclear, remember, is not just a fantastic fuel for generating electricity and emissions-free, but it's a really important fuel in deterring war. And when we acquiesce the development of nuclear weapons, for example, nuclear energy, pretty soon you don't have the intellectual or academic resources as well as the other natural resources. I'd rather rather than just go on and on about some of the other same things, let Cynthia talk a little bit, and then maybe if you have other specific questions, I'd like to dig in.
Other questions?
Good.
Okay.
Yes.
President, Ellen Milton, I cover climate for CNN. I wanted to ask you guys, is this the first time that a Republican climate energy plan has included these specific greenhouse gas reductions in it?
I can't speak for all Republican plans. It's not. I think to your point, it's unusual. I think there's a growing realization by politicians of all stripes that it's an issue that Americans want us to deal with. You've heard some differences, or at least some views up here from our colleagues. I've always said it's not a either or. You know, you're not either a denier or a worshiper. There are a whole bunch of people in between that understand that the climate's changing, but don't know whose fault it is and who's responsible for how much. Doesn't matter. The American people want us to deal with it. They want us to have solutions. And I'm saying, and I think what we're saying is, we think American solutions are better than other solutions. And we can take a lead, but it's got to be a lead in the global marketplace. So to answer your question, it's unusual. I don't know that we're making history today, but it's got to be an important part of it. I might add to one of the really important parts of even the Green New Deal. When you talk about things like electric vehicles, you talk about solar panels, there's another whole industry that supplies that is very energy intensive. Rare earth minerals especially. Again, another area where we have, as a country, acquiesced much of the mining of rare earth minerals and critical minerals that are important to these new technologies to other countries. And these other countries mine it much more recklessly than we do. They use labor standards that would never meet our standards. And yet we have some of those resources here. We can bring some of that back here. We need to bring some of that back here. And again, I think we can lead both in the cleaner mining of it and in the production of, of future opportunities.
And let me just add one point. The big thing that we're kind of focused on here is again, we're not putting a target, but we're saying up to. But the big difference with the Biden plan, that's all focused on America. Here's where the kind of austerity needs to happen. High energy costs that they're driving in our country right now. No production of, limited production of American energy, literally strong-arming American financial institutions not to invest in American energy. We think this is actually the complete backwards approach, because not only is it hurting workers, not only is it hurting states like ours, but it's also not doing anything to help on the problem. We have exhibited leadership. One of the big differences, one of the many differences we have with the Biden administration is they literally go to Glasgow and say, well, the Secretary of Energy was in North Dakota recently, and she said, we don't have the moral authority to talk about these issues with China unless we completely go to zero ourselves. This is ridiculous. We have the moral authority all day because what we are doing has been leading the world not only on energy production, but the reduction of global greenhouse gas emissions. And right now, when you look at the plan, what's the estimates are almost 100% of the increase in global greenhouse gas emissions for the world are estimated to come from non-OECD countries. China and India, primarily. And so what we're trying to do is to get after that, not by shutting down our industries, but by actually producing more, particularly in terms of opportunities with natural gas, that we think can help actually reduce global emissions. It is an approach that is 180 degrees different from the Biden Green New Deal, John Kerry approach, but we actually think that not only does it have potential, it's working. It's already working in America in what we're doing in terms of exporting clean burning American natural gas. But to the other point that Kevin and Rob Portman made, the ability to actually export American technology.
I do have a follow-up.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, just why now? And I'm curious, how much buy-in you guys have from House Republicans.
Go ahead.
If
Sure.
you sort of talked about
Sure.
there's many different stripes of the party on the
Yeah.
Is this sort of the coherent plan that you want?
So look, we've been working with Republicans. We've been reaching out to certain Democrats.
Senator Manchin?
How'd you guess? And there, I would say, with regard to the details, and we've been working on this for months, with regard to the details of this, I would not say that every senator up here was in full agreement on every aspect of this. There are a lot of other senators who are very supportive, couldn't make it here. But this is an ongoing conversation. We think it's important in part to what you don't hear about in the discussion. All you hear about is John Kerry, Green New Deal, Joe Biden, Glasgow. Americans need to understand that with regard to these issues, energy, jobs, the environment, we are leading the world. These are the facts. And we wanted to make sure there was a competing vision, because right now what dominates in the media, what dominates in policy discussions is purely the Biden-Kerry Green New Deal. Not only does it not work, but just look at the evidence. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, in the first 10 months of this administration, what are we getting? We are getting sky-high energy prices across the country, really, really hurting working families. We're getting great Americans in my state and others being laid off. And for what? For what? We literally have the President of the United States begging OPEC to produce more energy. When the Secretary of Energy was in Alaska, I met with her and I said, Madam Secretary, I have a better idea. As opposed to begging Russia and Iran to produce more American energy, why don't you get the boot of the federal government off the neck of producers in my state or in North Dakota or Wyoming or Texas? This makes total sense. And by the way, not only in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but in terms of the environmental standards. You go to the North Slope of Alaska, we have the highest standards on the production of energy any place on the planet Earth. That is a fact. Why would you outsource that to our adversaries? So we think the American people are supportive of a competing vision. We're working to coalesce members, including Democrats, on this. It's not fully coalesced yet, but we're going to continue to work it. And we thought after 10 months of hearing Green New Deal lunacy, that the American people needed to see a competing vision that was positive, pro-growth, pro-prosperity, and really is focused on the working men and women of this country who build stuff. Take a look at the statement by Terry O'Sullivan and Sean McGarvey. That's pretty important. Top union officials saying this is the direction we think we need to go. I haven't seen statements from them on the Green New Deal like that.
Could I ask you to do something that I think makes a lot of sense while you're reporting on this subject? When you're asking questions of the other side, the president, AOC, John Kerry, when you see things in bills like a provision in the current bill they're debating, for example, there's a small, as in millions, of dollars allocated to studying the effects of climate change on lactating people. I would ask you to ask them, what will that do to move the needle on climate change? What will that do? What will that study do to reduce greenhouse gases? What will that do to address the goals you've set for the United States on the emission of greenhouse gases? And just please do that with every one of these hard to correlate with the goal expenditures. And then please think about if we took that same amount of money and deployed our superior technology in India, what would that do to meet a greenhouse gas goal? And I think what you'll find is that our plan, what we're proposing, is going to move the needle on the portion of climate change that is caused by mankind.
So, I want to talk a little bit about, there's a number of things packed into your question, but specifically a couple of areas. One, with regard to who's all on board. Obviously, this is a diverse and a large package, and it's not done. In other words, we're inviting more. I don't even know if I'm for 100% of it, which is why it's not a bill at this point. But it does represent some really good, both Republican and bipartisan efforts. I take as an example, 45Q. Expansion of the tax credit for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which people like, obviously, John Hoeven and I support, and other coal-producing states, as does Sheldon Whitehouse, support it, because the goal is emissions reduction. Ben Ray Lujan and I have legislation, to reclaim, cap and reclaim abandoned mine wells, or abandoned wells, oil and gas wells around the country. Ben Cardin and I have legislation to use the tax code to encourage more nuclear generation. I love John Barrassel's got this idea of taking, how about we take the tax code and just make it neutral with regard to fuel and set some goals. There are a lot of really good ideas that are out there, that some of which are part of this plan. My hope actually is that after we do this and we start, people learn more about it and we invite more people in, we get past this, this craziness we're in right now that, I think maybe could come to an end fairly soon, considering that the American people are saying, we don't want these extremes. Let's get together. I actually think there is some opportunity to do some version of this. I also think it's really important. We haven't dug in real deeply on this yet, and I don't know the absolute solution to this. But when I talk about, for example, setting a 40% global goal, of reduction goal, obviously that's going to include a whole bunch of other countries. We have trading partners, and we have multilateral, and we have bilateral trade things in the works. We have continents, and we have polluters and adversaries. We have to, as a world, come together in some way. As you might recall, I'm one of the very rare Republicans during the last 4 years that thought we should have stayed in the Paris Accord. I thought it was an opportunity for the United States to bring its intellectual power to a global table and talk about real solutions. But we didn't, and it's an unfair set of standards, and so I understand why President Trump and others wanted out of Paris. But whether that's the forum, or whether it's bilateral trade deals, where we say to our trading partners, look, we're not going to accept a lower standard of manufacture. We're going to protect 100% of our supply chain, the integrity of it. And that means you're going to have to produce things at our level, with our standards, in order to do a trade deal with us. Now, that sounds harsh, that sounds simplistic, because it is, and we know it's not going to be that simple. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity here for a lot of people to come together, and we're just setting the table today for that further discussion.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.